we talked already about the idea of tolerance. And I'm actually not here to be tolerant. Because tolerance sort of presumes that I know what I'm doing and you guys don't, but I'll put up with you anyways.
The Prophet Muhammad, we believe is the final prophet, right? That he was a true prophet. Would you be willing to become a Muslim?
I wouldn't dispute a priori the idea that Muhammad was a true prophet.
Okay.
But I don't understand what that means.
In this video, Jordan Peterson is talking to a group of Muslims about the supremacy of Jesus Christ and the concept of a three-in-one God, which so many Muslims still have issues with till date. The whole debate was going on fine till the Muslim mistakenly asked Peterson to convert to Islam. He's going to start by trying to butter Peterson up, telling him he has done all his background checks on him and even read all his books in order to make himself more appealing to Peterson. Let's get into it.
Reading recently, I've read all your books. And I even read some of your peer-reviewed work, because when I was going to speak to you, then I said, I'm going to do my homework. Yeah? So I read everything. One of the things that you said one time in The Maps of Meaning, you started off the book by saying, when you were a young lad, I don't know how young you were, you said that you found the doctrines of Christianity incomprehensible and absurd, yeah? And you also said that you found you had some kind of issue with Christianity because of the Genesis narrative and how incongruent it was with scientific narratives. You went to a pastor, you said, or a church cleric or something, and then you left the church. Now, I've got a question. Do you still have the same position, or have you changed your position?
Well, I've changed my position a lot. I was only 13 then, and I was caught up in the battle, insofar it was manifested in me when I was 13. I was caught in the battle between Enlightenment rationality and traditional narrative belief. I had no idea how to reconcile those two things.
Do you feel like you can do that now?
I'm doing my best to reconcile.
So
yes, and I think, well, I certainly can do it a lot more than I did when I was 13.
Let me give you an example, right? This point, when you were 13, I think you were thinking straight. I'll be sorry to be very straight.
It's hard to believe that someone is disagreeable with you as you would manage that.
Because someone with an IQ of 180 or whatever you have, someone of your intelligence. When you were 13, you probably had an IQ of, 120 or something, So you were operating like my friend over here, Ali Dawa, on his level, at the age of 13. But what I was going to say was that, the reason why I think he was, because look at the Trinity, for example. Look at the schisms. Now, this goes to your specialism. The idea of three all-powerful entities, that Jesus is all-powerful, that the Father is all-powerful, the Son is all-powerful, and the Holy Spirit is all-powerful, but there's not three all-powerfuls, there's one all-powerful. You have one ultimately willing being, person, which is Jesus, and another person, which is ultimately willing, which is the Son. The Quran says about this, it says, مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. In chapter 23, verse number 91, it says that Allah has not taken any son, and he did not have any creator with him.
This has always been a point of contention between Muslims and Christians, why they don't see eye to eye. A Muslim man will likely tell you that they are worshipping the same God as Christians. Allah is God, which is acceptable. Yes, Allah, according to them, is God. But then, the way to meet this God is what differentiates Christianity with Islam. Christianity, the way to get to God is through Jesus Christ. He has said in his word, he said, no man comes to the Father except by me. Jesus himself said that. But Muslims will never want to admit the fact that the only way to get to God is through Jesus. They don't accept Jesus as God. They accept Jesus in as much as he's a prophet, one of the biggest, the greatest prophet, if you may. They accept Jesus that way. But the moment you tell a Muslim man that Jesus is God, according to his word, which he has said in the book of John chapter 1 verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And if that is not evidence enough, he says again in the book of 1 John chapter 5 verse 20, and we know that the Son of God is come and had given us an understanding that we may know him that is true, and we are in him that is true, even in his Son Jesus Christ. This is the true God and eternal life. So in essence, Jesus is God, but a Muslim man will never want to admit that, and that says everything about the religion.
Had that been the case, they would have stripped one another for what they would have competed and tried to outstrip one another for power. Meaning this idea of three all-powerful persons is unintelligible, to say the least. The idea that Jesus Christ exhibits two natures, I know that there are schisms and there's difference of opinion among Christians, but the fact that you have this human nature, where Jesus is walking and he sees the tree and he can't eat from the tree, he doesn't know that the tree is in season or not, or that he doesn't know when the hour is, or whatever it may be. The Quran says it very clearly. كَانَا يَأْكُلَانِ طَعَامٍ. Him and his mum used to eat food. This proposition that they're limited and unlimited at the same time is unintelligible. It's a contradiction. It's an affront to logic. This will cause you cognitive dissonance. Because if you want to be a rational actor, and you want to be...
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a rational actor.
But you do when you do your scientific experiments.
That's true.
So why do you separate the two things?
because rationality should be subordinated to something above it. And I'm trying to subordinate myself to that. And so my reaction to what you're saying is that this isn't an insult.
Yeah,
I'm telling you what my reaction is.
Please say
it's not even a criticism.
Of course.
I find that discussion, as soon as it started, I found that less interesting than what we were doing before. It was harder for me to focus on. And I think the reason for that is that it transforms to some, and I'm not saying this isn't necessary at sometimes, but it transforms the transcendent into something like an intellectual and propositional discussion. And so in some sense, we're debating perhaps not the fine points of theology, because they're more like the blunt points of theology. But there's something about that.
At this point, Jordan Peterson is going to make a very wild observation about the position of Christ across cultures, across religions, across ways of life, starting from the Hebrew, the Jews, the worship of Judaism. Judaism did not know what to make of Jesus Christ. At best, they thought him a radical, someone that came to disrupt the system. Till date, that is the view that most Jews still have about Christians. They see them as radicals, people that are not willing to follow the conventional ways of doing things. And that is the viewpoints that Islam has that is shaky.
There's something about that isn't what I want to do with you.
Yes.
You know, and it isn't that it's not necessary. So let me flip it around to some degree. So one of the things I'm very curious about is, obviously, the figure of Christ is contentious.
Yes.
And so the Jews don't know what to make of Christ in some fundamental sense, because he seems like a continuation of the prophetic tradition in some real sense. Plus he was Jewish, so that makes things complicated. And then, of course, the Christians put the figure of Christ as central in some real sense, but that begs the question of the relationship between Christ and God. And then in the Muslim community, Christ is also a central figure. And so I'm curious about that. And we could say we have doctrinal differences about what constitutes that centrality. It's like, fair enough. And I would also not say that I understand what that centrality means. So one of the ways I would understand that, let's say, is that in the Western tradition, and I don't know to what degree this is true in the Muslim tradition, one of the attributes of what Christ is psychologically is the logos. And so if we're engaged in dialogue, which is dual logos, then we're embodying the spirit of something like mutual enlightenment. And that's then the presence of that spirit in the genuine confines of temporal reality, right? It's something like the infinite descending to the finite to illuminate us. And to the degree that we can have a dialogue in good faith, which is also a religious notion, then we can engage in that process of dialogos, and that transforms and redeems us. And then when I say, well, do I believe that? I say, well, it isn't just that I believe it as a proposition, it's that I can tell when it's happening. And so can you, I think. It's like, you're going to see that this conversation will ebb and flow, you know, and some of the time it's going to grip you. You think we're at the heart of the matter, and sometimes your attention's going to wander. Your attention's going to wander when we're off the path. And so I would say that to the degree that you and I are communicating, this is a religious way of thinking about it, is that we're doing our best to embody the spirit of the logos. And if that's working, then we're making progress. And I know that in the Western tradition, that's part of what has been conceptualized as the fundamental attribute of the figure of Christ. And I know that Christ is central in the Muslim tradition. And so one of the things I would want to know is not how we differ doctrinally, because I don't even think I'm qualified to debate you on that case.
We've got the guy here.
Well, Jonathan might have some things to say, but what I would like to know instead is, why do you believe that the figure of Christ is central in some sense? Or maybe I've got that wrong, although I don't think so. Why do you think the figure of Christ is central both to the Muslim faith and the Christian faith? And what do you think that says about what we share in common? Because I really don't understand that. It's a mystery to me.
So
that's a very poignant question Jordan Peterson put forward right there. And it left him a little bit startled before he made up his mind to answer that. Because a Muslim telling us that they acknowledge the presence of God's Son without acknowledging him as a God himself is a misnomer. And that is the viewpoint that each and every Muslim will always bring to the table whenever issues like this come up. Now let's hear what he's going to say pertaining to Jordan Peterson's question.
Jesus Christ, if secular historians will look at him and differ on his existence or not. The majority, to be fair, do believe he existed, right? Even secular historians, atheists and agnostics and whatever it may be, right?
It's the simplest explanation.
Yeah, it's a simple, of course. Yeah, so I believe that first of all, Jesus Christ existed, which in the modern age is worth noting, right? Muslims are the only other major world religion who believe in Jesus Christ. as the Messiah, as the prophet.
Right,
He had the
right.
virgin
And this
birth.
is a strange thing, so we
yeah,
should definitely be trying to sort that out.
All right, so this is the point of commonality. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in his miracles, that he cured the blind with God's permission, that he raised the dead with God's permission. We believe that he even, he created some things which in the Gospel of Thomas not mentioned in the Bible, like, but for example, the clay bird and so on, that he blew into it and it became an actual bird, that he cured the leper with God's permission. We believe that he was one of the mightiest human beings that have ever lived on the earth.
And that is the problem right there, according to Islam. Jesus Christ is an ordinary human being. He is not God, which is a very, very wrong and erroneous point of view to make. They don't want to accept the fact that Jesus Christ is God. And Jordan Peterson is going to disprove this earnestly.
And we believe that his mother was the best woman who ever lived on the earth. The Quran actually explicitly says that.
Well, that seems like a good starting point.
Right, and so my question would be therefore, before we talk about symbolism, because a symbol can be something, you can have a symbol and an expression of something which exists at the same time. For example, you can have something which is not metaphoric, because you can't have a metaphor and non-metaphoric. But you can have a symbol and something which doesn't exist. For example, I say that you are a symbol for Western, I don't know, whatever it is, intellectualism, yeah? Possibly. I mean, you could debate, is Jordan Peterson a symbol for Western intellectualism? Debate it. And he exists. Now, here's the point, that there are central doctrines to Christianity, like the crucifixion, the ascension, the resurrection, and all the above, right? These are doctrines. How do we look at these doctrines? Because the reason why I'm asking you, I think you are qualified, or at least you have some, because you did mention in your lectures that you were taking the approach of the Alexandrian school, which is like Origin of Alexander and his Jewish teacher Philo and these kinds of people, who take what you call the spiritualizing text. They spiritualize the text. They were known, the Alexandrian school was known for spiritualizing the text. And they were aberrational in that sense. And that's why one of the reasons why they were seen as heretics by all, I think, all the churches.
So when I hear something like that, then the question that arises for me is, what do you mean happening?
The Muslim guy soon discovers he has been running circles around the topic without making any headway. And since time is also running out very fast, he decides to try another trick in his playbook to bait Jordan Peterson into answering a very tricky question without putting much thought into it.
I want to ask you a question just before we end.
Yeah, sure. I've only politely sat here just to indicate we need to wrap up.
Okay, I just want to ask one last question, because I'm interested in both of you in a sense, yeah? I said that, from a Muslim perspective, the question that we're asked to ask is, bring the evidence, yeah? If I were to bring reasonable evidence, which would satisfy some kind of probabilistic reasoning, that the Prophet Muhammad, we believe is the final prophet, right? That he was a true prophet, would you be willing to become a Muslim?
I wouldn't dispute a priori the idea that Muhammad was a true prophet.
Okay.
But I don't understand what that means. So obviously, so this is the way I'm going to look at this psychologically again. It's people are granted revelations, and it's obviously the case, let's speak empirically, that the revelation of Muhammad united a fractious society. And so it was a uniting revelation. Now, how to conceptualize, but it's not a universally uniting revelation, at least not yet or not now, because we're not all united. So why? Well, maybe we didn't understand the revelation properly. That's one possibility.
Is the presupposition what you're saying, that unity is the ultimate objective?
Well, not exactly, because then you have the problem of uniformity that you pointed out.
Even the idea of unity itself. I mean, is there? Well,
we talked about, so
unity is a great, just to be clear, I believe that unity is a great objective, but I don't think it's the all-defining one. For example, if there is an injustice that is so great that disunity is more appropriate, then I can imagine situations where disunity is probably better than unity.
Right.
I'm sure you can as well. For example, like in the Soviet Union.
That would be a false unity in some sense,
exactly.
Right?
So that's what
that's why you wanted to address the elephant under the carpet right away. Exactly. We can't have a false peace.
Exactly.
And we can't incorporate things we can't yet incorporate.
Not only did Jordan Peterson artfully sidestep all the traps laid for him by the Muslim interviewer, they also dismantled all his wrong ideals and notions about the concept of supremacy of Jesus Christ and the divinity. If you thought this video was insightful, kindly click like, subscribe, and watch out our last video on how a woman totally destroyed another Muslim guy on the streets of Canada. Thanks for watching.